The bet. The morning sun over Detroit was an unforgiving kind of bright, the kind that cracked through cheap blinds and lit up every cracked tile, unpaid bill, and medical invoice stacked on the kitchen table like a growing mountain of failure. Jenna Ruiz stood in the tiny kitchen of her one-bedroom apartment, the smell of stale coffee clinging to her hoodie, her dark curls tied in a messy knot, and her eyes bloodshot from a night of wrestling with numbers that didn't care about love or desperation. The number that haunted her most, $150,000, was printed in red at the top of the latest hospital invoice. Urgent, past due, immediate action required. Her mother, Maria, was asleep in the bedroom, her breathing shallow but stable. The surgery had saved her life, but the debt now threatened Jenna's. She had worked double shifts at the garage, sold her father's old tools, even pawned the gold necklace Maria had worn for 30 years. None of it made a dent. The world didn't care about a mechanic with oil under her fingernails and a heart full of panic. She needed a miracle. Or a mistake that looked like one. She met Deacon Blake in the alley behind the shop 2 days earlier, where he was leaning against his BMW like a billboard for temptation. Clean cut in that too-perfect way, he had the kind of smile that made you forget to check for your wallet. He wasn't a stranger exactly. He'd come in a few times asking for quick tune-ups, always flashing too much cash, always talking like money was water and he owned the faucet. "I hear you're good with engines," he'd said, tossing her $100 for a $40 job. "But I'm better with money. You ever think about doubling what you've got in a week?" Jenna had laughed then, wiped her hands on her overalls, and said, "You offering a lottery ticket or a scam?" "Neither," he'd grinned. "I'm offering opportunity, and baby, you look like you need one." Now standing in her apartment with that sick feeling coiled in her gut, she held the business card he'd given her. Deacon Blake, Private Investments, a phone number, and on the back one word, guaranteed. It was everything she should have run from, but desperation doesn't make logical decisions, it makes bets. Bad ones, dangerous ones, ones that feel like hope until they unravel. She called him. By noon, she was sitting across from him in a downtown lounge that smelled like leather, money, and lies. Deacon was wearing a charcoal suit and sunglasses indoors, which should have been red flag number 2 after the guaranteed promise. He spoke fast, like a man who'd rehearsed this pitch in front of mirrors. "It's a micro-investment pool," he said, sliding a printed graph across the table. "Short-term buy-ins, fast returns, you put in 10, I give you back 15 by Friday. Done. If I fail, you keep my car, Title S in the glove box." She stared at him. People don't just offer strangers that kind of deal. He smiled. "I don't offer this to strangers, I offer it to survivors, you look like one." It was a dangerous kind of flattery, the kind that worms under your skin when the world's been too cold for too long. Against every instinct she'd built surviving years of struggle, Jenna withdrew her entire savings that afternoon, just under $9,700, and gave it to a man who had nothing but charm and a name he could walk away from. By evening, she sat alone in the garage after hours, staring at her phone like it might explode with regret. It didn't. It just stayed silent, and silence never felt so loud. That's when Scarlett Avery walked in. Not burst in, not strolled, walked, deliberate, calm, like she already knew this was the beginning of something and wasn't in any hurry to prove it. She wore a dark green coat that hugged her tall frame, red curls falling over her shoulder like she'd stepped out of a magazine Jenna couldn't afford. Her eyes were the color of winter, blue-gray, distant, sharp. "You're Jenna?" she asked, scanning the garage without much interest. "I'm looking for someone who might be dumb enough to trust Deacon Blake." Jenna blinked. "Who are you?" "Scarlett, financial fraud investigator, unofficial, of course." She pulled a business card from her coat and held it between 2 fingers. No fancy fonts, no promises, just her name, a number, and the words, "Personal Recovery Consultant." Jenna didn't move. "You a cop?" Scarlett laughed, a low sound that didn't warm her eyes. "Worse, I used to be his partner." Silence settled between them. Jenna felt something tighten in her chest. "What do you want from me?" "To help," Scarlett said, stepping closer. "Or to stop you before you lose more than money." "You're too late," Jenna said quietly. "I already gave him everything." Scarlett blinked, and for the first time her face cracked, just a little, a flicker of pain. "Then we've got work to do." Jenna didn't know why she believed her. Maybe it was the fact that Scarlett wasn't selling anything. Maybe it was the weariness behind her posture, like someone who'd made all the wrong bets too. Or maybe it was because Jenna had nothing left to lose but her pride, and Scarlett didn't seem interested in taking that. They sat in the back office of the garage, Scarlett pulling out a sleek tablet and typing notes with the efficiency of someone who never wasted time on pleasantries. "How long have you known him?" "Couple months, but I only gave him the money today." "Let me guess, promised 15 in return." Jenna nodded. Scarlett's fingers paused. "He told me 25, bastard's lowering his payout because he knows people will settle for less." "You were one of his clients." "I was his mark, then his girlfriend, then his scapegoat when the feds started circling." Jenna studied her, trying to piece together the story that lived behind that carefully neutral expression. "So why help me?" Scarlett looked up. "Because someone should have helped me, and because I'm tired of letting men like Deacon think they can destroy people and walk away whistling." For the first time in weeks, Jenna felt something that wasn't hopelessness. It wasn't trust either, but it was close, like the beginning of a bridge over a canyon too wide to cross alone. They worked late into the night, cross-referencing bank withdrawals, tracking Deacon's burner numbers, checking license plate records. Jenna watched the way Scarlett moved, calm, decisive, no wasted motion. She didn't ask many personal questions, and Jenna was grateful. She wasn't ready to be known, only saved. At 1:42 a.m., Scarlett closed the laptop and leaned back in the squeaky office chair. "He's not in town anymore." Jenna's stomach dropped. "What?" "He left 2 hours after your deposit hit. He's done this before, hits 3 or 4 people, cashes out, then vanishes for a few months. Changes names, finds new faces. Rinse, repeat." Jenna stood, suddenly breathless. "So that's it, I'm just done." "No," Scarlett said, standing too. "That's not it. We're going to find him. But you need to understand something, Jenna. This isn't just about getting your money back. It's about making sure he never does this again." Jenna looked at her, unsure whether to laugh or scream. "What makes you think I care about anyone else right now?" Scarlett didn't flinch. "Because if you only care about revenge, you're no better than him." The words landed like a slap. Jenna turned away, ashamed of the truth they hit. The anger had been blinding, but beneath it a deeper ache, humiliation, loss, fear. She exhaled shakily. "I didn't do this for me. My mom's bills, they're drowning us. I was just trying to keep her above water." Scarlett softened then, the edge in her voice replaced by something closer to sorrow. "And now he's using that against you, just like he used my name to scam people, just like he used my heart to cover his tracks." Jenna turned to her. "What did he take from you?" Scarlett held her gaze. "More than money." Silence again, but not the kind that meant the end of a conversation, the kind that meant something had begun. Scarlett walked toward the door. "Get some rest. We start tracking his trail in the morning." And Jenna, "Yeah." "Next time someone says guaranteed, punch them in the throat." Jenna laughed for the first time in days. It hurt, but in the best way. As the door clicked shut behind Scarlett, Jenna looked down at her calloused hands, the grease under her nails, the burned scar on her forearm. She didn't look like a woman who got caught in cons. But then maybe no one did, until they did. She wasn't sure who Scarlett really was yet. Ally, stranger, or maybe just another version of the same broken dream. But for now, she had a name, a plan, and a reason to fight. And that was more than she had yesterday. Tomorrow, the chase would begin. But tonight she dared, for the first time in weeks, to hope. The promise. The next morning, Jenna sat on the curb outside the garage, elbows resting on her knees, her hoodie zipped to the throat even though the heat was already climbing. Her eyes followed the rising sun, but her thoughts were buried deep in shadow. The city stirred around her. Cars rolled by, birds called out from rusted poles, someone yelled at a dog 3 blocks away. But she felt cut off from it all, a woman sitting still while the world rushed past. The betrayal clung to her like sweat. $9,700. Her mother's medicine, her electricity bill, the only shot she had left to keep them both afloat. Gone. Just like that. Handed over to a man she didn't really know because desperation wore the same mask as faith when you were drowning. Inside the garage, tools clanked and engines coughed to life, but Jenna didn't move. She was waiting, not for Deacon, for the stranger with cold eyes and a warm voice who said she'd come back. Scarlett Avery. That name rang in Jenna's head like a question she hadn't dared to ask herself yet. Who was she really? What game was she playing? And why did her presence feel like the only solid thing in a world that had just fallen out from under Jenna's feet? She didn't have to wait long. Scarlett pulled up in a black hybrid sedan that looked like it hadn't seen dirt in years. Her window rolled down with a soft electric hum, and she waved Jenna in without ceremony. No good mornings, no pleasantries, just a simple, "Let's go." Jenna stood slowly, brushing gravel dust from her jeans, and slid into the passenger seat like she'd been waiting for this ride her entire life. They didn't talk much as Scarlett drove. Instead, she tapped the GPS, rerouted through neighborhoods Jenna hadn't seen in years, and sipped black coffee from a paper cup that bore no logo. Every movement Scarlett made was precise, intentional, like she didn't waste energy on anything she didn't need. And yet there was something soft beneath the armor. Jenna could feel it now, in the way Scarlett kept checking the rearview mirror, not because she was afraid, but because she'd been hunted before. Finally, Scarlett spoke. "He's in Toledo, just over the state line. He booked a room at a low-profile motel under a fake name we've seen before, Gavin Sharp. Room 12. He won't stay long. We have about 10 hours. Jenna's heart thudded. "How do you know that?" "I still have access to some tracking software," Scarlett said, not looking at her. "And I have someone on the inside who owed me a favor. Don't ask for more details. You don't want to carry them." That answer should have unnerved her. It should have made Jenna slam the brakes on this madness and jump out of the car. But it didn't, because Scarlett's voice wasn't cold or evasive, it was protective, like someone trying to shield her from something sharp. "You ever confront him before?" Jenna asked. Scarlett's jaw flexed. "Once didn't go how I thought." They stopped talking after that. Silence wasn't awkward between them, it never had been. It was like a quiet pact they shared, two women scarred by betrayal, navigating the broken systems of men who smiled too easily and promised too much. When they pulled into the motel's cracked asphalt lot, Jenna's pulse had found a rhythm somewhere between rage and terror. Her palms were slick, her mouth dry, but Scarlett was calm, her voice low and steady as she laid out the plan. "I'll go in first. He knows me. He might not run right away. If I give the signal, tap the back of my neck twice, you walk in. Do not talk unless I talk to you. Do not touch anything. Do not believe anything he says. Got it?" Jenna nodded, her breath caught somewhere between her ribs. Scarlett took a slow breath. "And if something goes wrong, if he bolts, you run. Don't chase him. Don't play hero." "Why are you doing this?" Jenna whispered. Scarlett met her eyes. "Because the only thing worse than being conned is watching someone else fall and knowing you could have stopped it." She stepped out of the car and walked toward the room like she was walking into a courtroom, every step crisp, every line of her body alert. Jenna watched her knock, heart slamming like a drum in her chest. The door opened. Deacon's silhouette appeared, taller than she remembered, still oozing charm even in a wrinkled t-shirt. And then the door shut behind them. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Jenna's legs ached from tension. She stared at the rearview mirror, her own eyes wild with questions. Finally, through the dusty window, she saw it, 2 taps at the back of Scarlett's neck. Jenna opened the car door and walked into room 12. The air inside smelled like cheap cologne, sweat, and the kind of lies that take root in your bones. Deacon was sitting on the bed, legs crossed casually, smiling like a fox who still thought he owned the henhouse. Scarlett stood by the dresser, arms folded, watching him like a hawk. Jenna didn't speak. She just stared. "Well, well," Deacon said, rising to his feet and offering his hand like they were old friends. "You must be Jenna. You look better angry than desperate, but then most women do." Jenna didn't move. He smirked, dropped his hand. "Scarlett, I told you, if you wanted to play Robin Hood, you should have brought a cape." Scarlett's voice was steel. "You took almost 10 grand from her under false pretenses. That's fraud." He chuckled, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. "Nope. That's an investment agreement. Signed, witnessed, dated. She gave it willingly. I didn't promise results, just potential." Jenna's voice cracked. "You said guaranteed." He waved a dismissive hand. "And did you record it?" "No, then it's her word against mine. And this," he held up the paper like a trophy, "is the only word that counts in court." Scarlett took a slow step forward. "Give the money back." Deacon raised an eyebrow. "Or what, you'll call your little cop friend? You forget I've danced this dance. I know how the song ends. No evidence, no crime, no payout. You of all people should know that, Scarlett." And then something unexpected happened. Scarlett smiled, not coldly, not cruelly, just quietly, and it was Deacon's turn to falter. She pulled out her phone. "Actually, this time I brought a better partner." She turned the screen. A live stream was broadcasting, microphone on. Jenna's old mechanic friend Dale had been listening the whole time from the parking lot, recording everything. Deacon's smirk vanished. And he's not the only one, Scarlett added, tapping her earpiece. This whole motel's under surveillance. My friend Layla's waiting at the end of the lot. She's got questions, and maybe cuffs. Deacon's face twisted into something darker. You set me up. You set yourself up the minute you thought I'd let you do to her what you did to me. Scarlett took Jenna's hand then, firm and warm. Let's go. They turned and walked out, leaving Deacon frozen in the wreckage of his own ego. Layla, in plainclothes, approached from the sidewalk, nodding once at Scarlett, then at Jenna. We'll take it from here. The drive back was silent again, but a different kind of silence now. It buzzed with adrenaline, trembled with relief. Jenna stared out the window as the city rolled past, a weight lifting from her chest she hadn't even realized she was carrying. Finally, Scarlett spoke. You okay? Jenna nodded slowly. I think so. Scarlett pulled into a diner on the edge of town and parked. Come on, you need food, and I need to breathe. They sat in a red booth under fluorescent lights, the scent of fries and coffee wrapping around them like comfort. Scarlett sipped her drink, studied her plate, then looked up. You did good in there. Jenna laughed weakly. I didn't do anything. You didn't fold, that matters. There was something in Scarlett's eyes then, something Jenna couldn't name yet but felt pull at her. A softness that didn't come from pity, a strength that wasn't about control. Why do you care? Jenna asked. Really? Scarlett stared at her for a moment. Because I know what it's like to bet everything on someone's promise and lose. I lost more than money, Jenna. I lost myself, and I don't want that for you. Jenna reached across the table, her fingers grazing Scarlett's. Then maybe we find what we both lost, together. Scarlett didn't pull away. Maybe. In that moment, the diner faded. The con, the money, even the pain. All that remained was the simple contact of two hands in the middle of a wrecked world and the quiet recognition that sometimes what you need isn't revenge or restitution, but a person willing to stand beside you when the stakes are broken and the future unclear. The fallout. The days that followed the confrontation at the motel unfolded slowly, like a bruise spreading under the skin quietly, invisibly, yet undeniably present in every movement Jenna made. She returned to her apartment each night exhausted, mentally drained from the mixture of rage, relief, and uneasy gratitude that tangled inside her. The garage felt strangely small now, as if the air itself knew she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. Life didn't simply return to normal, because normal had been shattered the moment she placed her savings in Deacon's hands. Now she drifted through her routines with the weight of uncertainty pressing down with every breath. She had no guarantee the money would ever be recovered, and yet she felt less alone than she had in years, and that contradiction unsettled her more than the debt itself. Scarlett became a quiet, constant presence, never intrusive, never demanding, always arriving like a steady force of gravity. She would show up at the garage with a file tucked under her arm, or a cup of strong coffee she claimed she bought for herself but always handed to Jenna first. They worked in the small back office surrounded by tools, invoices, dusty shelves, and the lingering scent of motor oil. Scarlett would sit in the old squeaky chair while Jenna leaned against the desk, their shoulders nearly touching as they dug through old case files, police reports, and digital trails left behind by Deacon in past cons. Each day revealed a new layer of the man they were hunting, and with every revelation, Jenna understood just how deeply she had been manipulated, not because she was foolish, but because desperate people became easy prey. What surprised her most wasn't the depth of Deacon's schemes, but the depth of Scarlett's guilt. It lived in the quiet spaces between their conversations, in the way Scarlett would go silent whenever the topic drifted toward the past, or how she would flinch at certain memories as though they were still fresh. Jenna found herself studying her more than the files, watching the way Scarlett's jaw tightened when she encountered lies similar to the ones she once fell for, the way her eyes darkened with an old shame she carried like a second skin. There were moments when Jenna wanted to reach out and say something, anything, to ease the burden, but she hesitated, unsure whether she had earned the right to touch such guarded parts of someone else. Meanwhile, Maria's condition weighed heavily on Jenna's conscience. She hid the truth from her mother, insisting that everything was handled, even though nothing had been resolved. Every time she tucked the blanket around Maria's frail body or helped her reach for a glass of water, Jenna felt the sting of failure burn deeper. She had promised to protect her mother, to take on every burden so she wouldn't have to, and yet here she was, drowning in debt, chasing after a professional con artist, relying on a stranger with a past too murky to decipher. But whenever Scarlett stepped into the apartment, gently greeting Maria and offering her a warm smile, Jenna felt the tightness in her chest loosen, as if Scarlett's presence alone was enough to carry some of the weight she'd been holding for so long. One evening, after another long day of planning and searching, Scarlett walked Jenna home. The night air was cool, the sidewalks wet from a light drizzle that left reflections shimmering like broken stars. Street lamps flickered above them, casting their shadows long and uneven. They walked close enough that Jenna could hear the faint rustle of Scarlett's coat with each step, but far enough that the distance between them carried a quiet tension neither dared disturb. Scarlett finally broke the silence as they reached Jenna's building. "You're handling this better than most people would," she said softly. Jenna scoffed, though there was no humor in it. "I don't feel like I'm handling anything. I feel like I'm one wrong step away from collapsing." "You're still standing," Scarlett replied. "That's more than he expected from you." Jenna paused at the entrance, her hand resting on the chipped metal railing. "Why did you come back that first day? You could have warned me and left. You didn't owe me anything." Scarlett hesitated. Her eyes held a vulnerability Jenna hadn't seen before. "I saw myself in you. The fight, the desperation, the need to protect someone you love even when the world keeps taking. And maybe I needed to believe I could help someone the way no one helped me." Jenna felt something warm slide into her chest, something dangerous, something tender. She swallowed hard, unable to look away from Scarlett. "You did help me." Scarlett's voice lowered. "Jenna, promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that if this gets dangerous, you'll walk away." Jenna's heart lurched. "Scarlett, I'm not running again." "That's the problem," Scarlett whispered. "Sometimes running is the only thing that keeps you alive." Their eyes locked, charged with a tension that felt too intimate for the damp Detroit night, too raw for the broken pavement beneath their feet. Jenna stepped closer without meaning to, her breath catching as she found herself inches away from Scarlett's face. Scarlett didn't move. If anything, she leaned in, the slightest tilt of her head betraying a longing she was too disciplined to voice. But neither one closed the distance. Instead, Scarlett stepped back, exhaling as if something inside her had cracked open and she couldn't risk letting more spill out. "Good night, Jenna," she said gently. And then she turned and walked away, leaving Jenna staring after her with her pulse pounding in her throat. The next morning, the storm hit. Layla showed up at the garage before Jenna even clocked in, her police badge clipped to her belt, her expression tight and grim. Jenna felt anxiety knot in her stomach immediately. "What happened?" she demanded, wiping her hands on a rag. "It's about Deacon," Layla said. "He's gone." Jenna blinked. "Gone where?" Gone, Layla replied quietly. "He slipped out during transfer. Someone tipped him off. He's already across state lines. We don't know where." Jenna's breath hitched. "Someone tipped him off? Who? How?" Layla's jaw tightened. "We don't know, but this whole operation, it's getting messy, Jenna. I need you to be careful." Jenna nodded, though her mind was spinning. The moment Layla left, she called Scarlett. No answer. Panic crawled beneath her skin. She tried again, straight to voicemail. She sent a text. Nothing. It wasn't like Scarlett to vanish without a word. Jenna felt a sharp ache in her chest, fear mixed with something she didn't want to name. Hours passed before Scarlett finally appeared at the garage, her hair pulled back, her coat damp from the wind. She looked weary, almost haunted. Jenna rushed toward her. "Where were you?" I called. Scarlett didn't meet her eyes. "I know, I had something to handle." "Deacon escaped," Jenna blurted. "Someone tipped him off," Layla said. "I know," Scarlett interrupted, her voice thin. "I know he's gone." Jenna froze. "How do you know?" Scarlett closed her eyes as if bracing for impact. "Because he called me." The world tilted. Jenna felt the floor slip out from under her, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. "He called you? Why, Scarlett, what are you talking about?" Scarlett finally looked up, her gaze steady but full of something like regret. "Because he thinks we're still the same people we used to be, that I'd warn him, that I'd protect him. He wanted me to run with him again." Jenna felt sick. "And did you?" Scarlett stepped closer, her voice trembling. "No. I told him I'm not the woman he left behind. I told him I'd rather burn every bridge I've ever built than help him hurt one more person." Jenna forced a breath past the lump in her throat. "Then why do you look like you just lost something?" Scarlett swallowed hard. "Because I lost the illusion that he'd changed, and losing even the hope of a lie hurts more than believing it." Jenna's anger softened. She stepped closer, her voice gentle. "Scarlett, you're not alone in this." Scarlett looked at her, something breaking open behind those stormy eyes. "Neither are you." The moment felt like the first stone in a bridge they were both terrified to cross. And yet, for the first time since her savings disappeared, Jenna didn't feel like she was falling anymore. She felt something sturdier beneath her feet, something real, something frighteningly near to hope. But hope was dangerous, and the road ahead was only getting darker. The plan. The city was soaked in a gray drizzle, that kind of slow, cold rain that didn't fall in sheets but lingered in the air like sorrow, misting your clothes and skin until it felt like even your bones had turned damp. Detroit always looked older when it rained, as if the buildings remembered the weight of every disappointment, every broken promise. Jenna stood beneath the flickering neon sign of the diner, watching droplets chase each other down the glass. Her fingers were curled around a styrofoam cup of black coffee she hadn't touched. Her mind wasn't here, not really. It was replaying Scarlett's voice over and over again like a broken record she couldn't turn off. "Because I lost the illusion that he'd changed." That sentence had embedded itself into her like a splinter in her ribs. How many illusions had she clung to in her own life just to keep going? That she could fix things if she just worked harder, that the system would protect good people. That giving someone the benefit of the doubt wasn't a gamble but a virtue. And perhaps the most dangerous illusion of all, that vulnerability didn't carry a cost. Across from her, Scarlett sat motionless, hands resting on the table, eyes scanning the screen of her tablet. Her expression was unreadable again, guarded, clinical, controlled. But Jenna had begun to recognize the small tells. The slight furrow between her brows, the way her thumb tapped the edge of the screen when she was holding back emotion. She had learned Scarlett's silences as much as her words, and tonight they were both drowning in a silence thick with regret, confusion, and something else neither of them had dared name. It was Scarlett who finally broke it, her voice low and even. "Deacon resurfaced in Cincinnati. A former associate spotted him at a nightclub called The Fuse. He's using another alias now, Brent Locke, and he's not alone. Word is he's already working a new angle. This time it's crypto, promising investors double returns in under 10 days. Jenna leaned back, the vinyl booth groaning under her weight. "He just moves on like nothing happened, like none of us matter." Scarlett nodded slowly. "That's what makes him dangerous. He doesn't just lie, he believes his lies. They're not stories to him. They're realities he constructs and discards like old clothes." Jenna watched the condensation on the diner window bead and fall. "Then we need to tear down whatever new illusion he's building, brick by brick." Scarlett met her gaze and something shifted. "Then we build a plan, a real one. This time we don't just catch him, we expose him." The plan took form over 3 long nights spent in Jenna's apartment, the floor littered with takeout containers and empty coffee cups, the table covered in maps, printed photos, and flowcharts. Scarlett worked with surgical precision, analyzing patterns in Deacon's past cons, identifying weak points, testing response times. Jenna handled logistics, booking hotels, tracing connections through old mechanic buddies, setting up a burner phone linked to a fake investor profile. Their chemistry, once charged with tension and suspicion, had evolved into something sharper, more fluid. They moved like pieces of a puzzle finding their fit. They didn't need to fill silences anymore because everything important was communicated in glances, nods, the small curve of a lip when a breakthrough occurred. It was more than collaboration. It was alignment. On the 3rd night, as Scarlett leaned over the table to mark a route on the map, her hand brushed Jenna's. The touch was brief, accidental, but it sent a jolt through Jenna's spine. She looked up, startled, only to find Scarlett already looking at her, eyes softer than they had been in days. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The storm outside deepened, thunder echoing in the distance. Jenna swallowed hard. "We're really doing this, huh?" Scarlett smiled faintly. "We're doing this." And then Jenna asked the question that had been burning inside her chest for days. "Why are you still here?" Scarlett blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean you could have walked away. After Toledo, after everything. You warned me, you helped me, you didn't have to stay." Scarlett lowered her eyes to the map. "I stay because I want to, because helping you feels like rewriting a chapter I never got to end properly. And because," she hesitated, her voice catching, "you remind me what it's like to believe in someone again." Jenna's breath caught. "Scarlett." But before she could finish the sentence, Scarlett stood abruptly and moved to the window, her back turned. "We need to focus on the plan," she said quietly. It hurt, that sudden shift, But Jenna understood. Vulnerability was a door that once opened could never be closed the same way again, and some people, like Scarlett, had learned to build locks on every side of their heart just to survive. Still, that night, as they finalized the plan and packed their bags for Cincinnati, something had changed. The space between them was no longer just strategy, it was something heavier, something more fragile. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Jenna, under a pseudonym, would pose as an interested investor, an automotive shop owner looking to diversify. She would meet Deacon in a public location, record the entire conversation, and pretend to be easily impressed by his pitch. Scarlett would monitor from a distance, feeding lines through an earpiece, and prepare law enforcement to act the moment they had enough to pursue a formal complaint. The meeting was set at a rooftop lounge overlooking the Cincinnati skyline, all chrome and glass, the kind of place that made people feel important. Jenna walked in wearing a blazer that didn't quite feel like hers, hair tied back, nerves jangling with every step. Deacon was already seated at the bar, sipping an overpriced drink, his smile as charming and soulless as ever. "You must be Lucy," he said, standing to kiss her cheek. Jenna let him, swallowing the urge to recoil. Conversation began. He pitched hard, talked about market disruption, liquidity pools, influencer partnerships. He used big words like decentralized asset funneling and hypergrowth and turnkey accelerators. Jenna played the part, asking naive questions, laughing at the right moments, nodding like a woman dazzled by success. All the while, Scarlett's voice was steady in her ear, guiding her responses, calming her with quiet reassurances. "You're doing great. He's buying it. Just keep him talking." And he did. For an hour, Deacon spilled everything, names of clients, promises of doubled returns, even hinted at laundering routes disguised as angel funding. Jenna kept the recorder running the whole time. Finally, he leaned closer and said the line that would seal his fate. "I don't just make people money, Lucy. I make them believe they deserve it." Scarlett's voice came through. "That's it, that's enough, stand by." But something shifted in Deacon's face. A flicker, a shadow, his smile faded just slightly. "You're not really here for the money, are you?" Jenna's stomach flipped. "What?" "You've got that look," he said, eyes narrowing. "The look of someone who already knows the truth and wants me to confirm it." Scarlett's voice sharpened. "Jenna, walk away now." But Deacon reached for Jenna's hand. "You're not Lucy, are you?" Scarlett, Jenna, get out. Jenna stood abruptly, heart racing. "You're right," she said, voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. "I'm not." In a blink, Deacon grabbed her wrist and leaned in, his voice low and venomous. "Did she send you, that red-headed parasite?" Scarlett was running now. Jenna could hear her breath in the earpiece. "I'm coming, hold on." But Jenna didn't freeze. She yanked her arm free, her voice calm and loud enough for the nearby bartender to hear. "Let go of me." Deacon looked around, realized too late that eyes were on them, that the illusion had shattered. He stood quickly, but Scarlett was already there, between them, eyes blazing. "It's over, Deacon." He laughed bitterly. "You think you're some kind of hero now." Scarlett didn't flinch. "No, I'm just done being the victim." Security arrived seconds later. Police, tipped off by Layla, moved in just behind. It happened fast after that, too fast for Jenna to process. Deacon's voice faded into the background as he was cuffed and escorted out. The rooftop quieted. The skyline stood still. Jenna and Scarlett stood in the aftermath, breathing hard, rain misting their hair, the city glowing beneath them. "You okay?" Scarlett asked, touching Jenna's arm. Jenna nodded slowly. "Are you?" Scarlett gave a small, tired smile. "I think for the first time in years, yeah." They stood in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. The plan had worked. The trap had been set, and they hadn't just caught a con, they had reclaimed something even more valuable. Themselves. The trap. The rain had finally stopped, but the air in Cincinnati still carried that wet, metallic scent that came after a long storm, like the city had been wrung out and left to dry under a sky full of memories. Jenna stood at the edge of the parking lot outside the precinct, arms crossed over her chest, watching the puddles shimmer beneath flickering street lamps. Her clothes still held the faint scent of rooftop whiskey and adrenaline. It had been hours since they left the lounge, but the images hadn't stopped replaying in her mind. The tension in Deacon's eyes when he realized he'd been caught, the firm grip of his fingers on her wrist, the way Scarlett had appeared like a flame through fog, fierce and unwavering. It wasn't just a takedown. It had been a reckoning for all of them. Inside the precinct, Deacon was being processed, but Jenna didn't care about the handcuffs or the paperwork. What mattered was that he was finally cornered, not by the system, but by the people he underestimated most. Her Scarlett, two women who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The truth was this wasn't about money anymore, not really. Money was just the currency of betrayal. What Deacon stole wasn't just cash, it was belief. The belief that decency meant safety, that kindness wouldn't be weaponized, that heartbreak couldn't be monetized. But tonight, they had made him pay in something deeper than dollars. They had made him face the weight of what he'd left behind. Scarlett stood a few feet away, phone to her ear, speaking in low tones to someone Jenna couldn't quite place, probably Layla, confirming the chain of custody, making sure no loophole would let Deacon slip through the cracks again. She wore her coat buttoned tight, red curls damp against her collar, face unreadable in that way Jenna had come to understand as protective more than distant. Scarlett didn't show her wounds. She folded them into her posture, her silence, the slight downturn of her eyes when she thought no one was watching. And Jenna had spent so long pretending she didn't need anyone that she'd almost missed the miracle of being seen. Scarlett ended the call and approached quietly. "It's done. He'll be transferred tomorrow. Formal charges are in motion. They've got enough to open up the old cases, too. He won't walk away from this one." Jenna nodded slowly. "Good." They stood there in silence for a beat. Then Scarlett asked, "How's your wrist?" Jenna looked down at it, surprised she hadn't even thought about the bruise until now. "It's fine." Scarlett stepped closer. "Let me see." Without hesitation, Jenna offered her arm. Scarlett took it gently, turning it over with careful fingers. The touch was light, clinical almost, but it sent something warm rushing through Jenna's chest. Scarlett's fingers lingered longer than they needed to, and when she looked up, her eyes had softened. "I shouldn't have let you go in alone," she whispered. "You didn't let me, I chose it," Jenna replied, voice steady. Scarlett hesitated. "Still, I promised I'd protect you." "And you did." For a long moment, the air between them buzzed with words unsaid. Regrets, promises, something deeper neither of them dared name out loud. Then, without thinking, Jenna took a step forward, closer. Close enough to see the tired circles under Scarlett's eyes, to smell the faint traces of cedar and rain in her coat. Close enough to feel the gravity pulling between them. "Come back with me," Jenna said, not as an offer, but as something inevitable. Scarlett didn't answer with words, she simply nodded. The drive back to Detroit was quiet, but it wasn't the silence of strangers anymore. It was the silence of two people sitting inside something fragile and sacred, too afraid to speak in case the spell broke. The highway lights painted them in yellow streaks and passing reflections, and every now and then, Jenna glanced over to find Scarlett already watching her, a half smile at the corners of her mouth. At one point, Jenna reached over and placed her hand over Scarlett's without a word. And Scarlett didn't pull away. When they got to Jenna's apartment, it was nearly 3 a.m. The city slept outside, but inside something stirred, something alive, tender, and undeniable. Jenna opened the door and stood aside, letting Scarlett in, watching as she looked around the small space like she was seeing it for the first time. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the creak in the floorboard near the window, the framed photo of Jenna and Maria on the shelf, slightly crooked. "It feels like home," Scarlett said softly. Jenna smiled. "It's not much." Scarlett turned to her. "It's everything." They didn't talk after that, not for a long while. Scarlett stepped closer slowly and Jenna met her in the middle. There was no music, no thunderclap moment, just a simple collision of breath and skin and aching, quiet relief. Their lips met like they had been waiting to find each other in every wrong room, every wrong year. This was no longer a question. It was an answer they had both been too afraid to ask for. Scarlett kissed her with the desperation of someone who'd held back too long, who'd stitched her own wounds shut and forgotten how to let someone else inside. Jenna answered with the quiet ferocity of someone who'd spent her life believing love was for people who had time, money, ease, and had now learned that sometimes love was born in fire, in survival, in the hands of the one person who didn't run. After they lay together in the dark, the sounds of the city bleeding through the window in gentle echoes. Jenna rested her head on Scarlett's shoulder, fingers tracing absent patterns on her arm. "You think it's really over?" she asked quietly. Scarlett sighed. "Deacon's in custody, that chapter's closed." "But what about us?" Jenna asked, barely above a whisper. Scarlett turned her head, met her eyes in the dim light. "I don't know, but I want to find out." Jenna nodded slowly. "Me too." They fell asleep tangled together on the couch, wrapped not just in blankets but in something warmer, something hard-won and utterly terrifying. It wasn't safety, it wasn't certainty, but it was real. The next morning, Jenna woke to the sound of eggs sizzling in a pan. She sat up, confused for a moment, until she smelled the coffee and saw Scarlett in the kitchen, wearing one of her hoodies, moving like she'd always belonged there. The sight hit her with unexpected force. It was simple, domestic, ordinary, and it felt like everything she had ever wanted but never thought she could have. "You cook?" Jenna asked, padding barefoot into the room. Scarlett turned, smiling. "A little, mostly eggs, you." Jenna grinned, "Mostly coffee." They ate together at the tiny table, knees touching, plates balanced awkwardly between papers and notes and leftover evidence from the investigation. After they finished, Jenna leaned back in her chair and stared at Scarlett. "What happens next?" Scarlett's smile faded into something more serious. "Next, we wait for the trial, and then we start over." "Together?" Jenna asked. Scarlett reached across the table and took her hand. "If you want." Jenna didn't hesitate. "I do." The trap had been set. The con man was caught. But in the process, two women who had learned to armor themselves against the world had done the most dangerous thing of all. They had chosen to trust again. And this time, it wasn't a gamble. It was a promise. The reveal. The courtroom smelled like old paper, dust, and something sterile that clung to the metal benches and gray-painted walls. It wasn't grand like the ones on TV, no echoing mahogany chambers or stern judges peering over high wooden podiums. It was smaller, colder, built for function, not justice. But Jenna sat there, hands clenched in her lap, every inch of her body tight with anticipation. She had never been inside a courtroom before, not as a witness, not as a victim, and certainly not as the woman who helped bring down a man like Deacon Blake. Her nerves buzzed beneath her skin like static electricity, but beside her sat Scarlett, quiet and composed, her legs crossed, her coat folded neatly on the bench behind her. She hadn't said much that morning, only offered a steady hand on Jenna's shoulder and a small nod that said, "We're still in this together." It had been weeks since the trap was sprung and the arrest made, and life had returned to some strange version of normal. Maria was stable. The medical bills still existed, but were now manageable thanks to legal aid and an anonymous tip that led to Deacon's offshore account being frozen. Scarlett had moved in temporarily, not that either of them had labeled it, but her toothbrush rested beside Jenna's in the bathroom, and her jacket now hung on the same hook as Jenna's hoodie by the front door. They existed in a rhythm that was easy and terrifying. Easy because they didn't need to try. Terrifying because neither of them knew what they were supposed to do now that the fight was behind them. And yet Scarlett had grown quieter with each passing day, not cold, never cruel, but thoughtful, distant. Jenna had watched her gaze linger longer out windows, her answers grow slower, her silences deeper. Something was shifting, something unspoken. And it began to gnaw at Jenna in a way she couldn't explain. She hadn't dared ask, not yet, not when they were so close to the final verdict. But the questions hovered in every glance they shared. In every night Scarlett stayed up reading documents Jenna no longer had the strength to care about. Now in the courtroom, Jenna stared at the back of Deacon's head as he sat at the defendant's table in a cheap suit and handcuffs, no longer slick and smug, just tired and cornered. A far cry from the man who once leaned across a rooftop bar and offered dreams wrapped in lies. The judge entered, the room stood, the ceremony began. The charges were read: fraud, conspiracy, impersonation, intent to defraud across state lines. The words hit Jenna like hammers, not because they shocked her, but because they validated every sleepless night, every doubt, every moment she thought she was foolish to hope for justice. Scarlett's hand found hers beneath the bench. That quiet touch steadied her more than anything the law ever could. The trial was swift. Deacon's lawyers tried to paint him as a misunderstood entrepreneur, a man of ideas who got ahead of his paperwork. But the evidence was overwhelming. Jenna's recording, Scarlett's testimony, the timeline, the victims, the stolen identities. There was no escape route this time, and when the guilty verdict was read, there was no applause, no celebration, just silence, heavy and real, like a door closing for good. Outside the courthouse, the sky was clear, a rare patch of blue in a city that often wore gray like armor. Scarlett stood with her back to the building, hands in her coat pockets, eyes lifted to the clouds. Jenna approached slowly, unsure of what to say now that everything they fought for had been won. She studied Scarlett's profile, the way her hair caught the wind, the faint lines of exhaustion around her eyes. There was something in her stillness that felt final. "So we did it," Jenna said, her voice soft. Scarlett nodded. "Yeah, we did." Jenna hesitated. So why don't you look happy? Scarlett turned to her then, and in her eyes was a storm Jenna hadn't seen before. Not anger, not fear, but guilt, deep, raw, unapologetic guilt. Because I didn't just help bring him down, she said slowly. I helped build him. Jenna's chest tightened. What are you talking about? Scarlett looked away, jaw clenched. Before you ever met Deacon, before he started using fake names and empty promises, he was just a guy with a dream. And I believed in him. I didn't just believe in him, I built the websites, I made the connections, I vouched for him. I helped him look legitimate. I helped him scam people because I thought we were building something real. He didn't lie to me at first, not in the way you think. He made me complicit. Jenna felt the world tilt slightly. You never told me that. I didn't know how, Scarlett whispered. Because I wasn't just a victim. I was part of the machine. I left when I realized what he was doing. I walked away and tried to forget. But every time he used one of my old designs or pitched to someone I introduced him to, I felt it. I carried it. Jenna's heart ached. Scarlett, why didn't you tell me before? Scarlett finally met her eyes, and in that gaze was everything she had hidden. Shame, fear, longing, and the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, she could still be seen. Because I didn't want you to look at me the way I look at myself. Jenna took a step forward, then another, until they were inches apart. She reached up and touched Scarlett's cheek, gently turning her face toward her. You didn't scam me. You saved me. You didn't lie to me. You stood beside me. Whatever part you played back then, it doesn't change who you are now. Scarlett's lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with something more dangerous. Hope. I see you, Jenna said, voice trembling. All of you, and I still want you. Scarlett broke then, not in a loud or dramatic way, but in the quiet collapse of a woman who'd carried guilt like armor for too long. She wrapped her arms around Jenna and held her like she was afraid she'd vanish. And Jenna held her back with equal force, grounding them both in the truth that the past did not define them. That mistakes, no matter how deep, could be repurposed into something honest. Later, back in the apartment, they sat side by side on the couch, the afternoon sun pouring through the windows like forgiveness. Scarlett traced patterns on Jenna's hand, head resting on her shoulder. I want to stay, Scarlett said, almost in a whisper. You already have, Jenna replied. They didn't talk about the future that day, not in exact terms. But in the way they cleaned the kitchen together, in the way they chose a new show to binge-watch instead of rewatching the same reruns, in the way Jenna placed a spare key in Scarlett's palm without ceremony, it was clear. The reveal hadn't destroyed them. It had freed them. From guilt, from silence, from the past. And in its place, something new had begun, quietly, stubbornly, beautifully. Love. The beginning. City had changed, or maybe Jenna had. Detroit still carried its grit like a second skin, still hummed with the same offbeat rhythm of potholes and jazz, of broken buildings and rebuilt dreams. But for the first time in years, Jenna noticed the color in it, the gold shimmer in autumn leaves falling on sidewalks, the warmth in a neighbor's passing nod, the laughter of children darting through crosswalks like hope in motion. She no longer just moved through the city with her head down, shoulders tight against the wind. She breathed in the air like it belonged to her again. Her story, once tethered to loss and debt, had unfolded into something wider, something that dared to hold joy in the same palm as grief. It had been 3 months since the verdict, 3 quiet, healing, complicated months. The world outside had moved on quickly, headlines changed, court transcripts archived, victims processed into statistics. But inside her apartment, inside the little life she and Scarlett were building, nothing was rushed. There was no parade, no medals for surviving what they had survived. But there were small victories. Maria's recovery was steady. The hospital finally agreed to restructure the payments. Jenna's garage had picked up new clients, some drawn by the story, others by reputation. But what mattered most wasn't the return of income. It was the return of peace. Scarlett had stayed. Not in the dramatic, movie-ending way that involved declarations or grand gestures. She simply never left. Her coffee mug was now the one with the chipped handle. Her books were stacked beneath the side table. Her shoes sat beside Jenna's by the door. Her laugh filled the apartment on lazy Sunday mornings when she danced barefoot in the kitchen, pretending to burn pancakes while Jenna watched with arms crossed and eyes full of quiet awe. It wasn't perfect. There were nights when Scarlett still jolted awake from dreams she wouldn't speak of. Days when she disappeared into research rabbit holes, her mind gripped by some new injustice she had to help unravel. But she always came back. And Jenna no longer flinched at the sound of silence. Because now, silence came with the soft rhythm of someone breathing beside her. The past wasn't gone. It never would be. Sometimes Jenna still woke with the memory of Deacon's voice in her head. Sometimes Scarlett still stared too long at old files, her jaw clenched like a woman still learning how to forgive herself. But healing, she'd come to learn, wasn't the absence of memory. It was the presence of something stronger to hold onto. And Scarlett, fierce, complicated, broken, and beautiful Scarlett, had become that anchor. On a chilly November morning, they stood on the roof of the garage, coffee steaming in their hands, watching the sky turn from gray to gold. Below them, the city stretched out, tired and beautiful. Jenna exhaled slowly, her breath forming small clouds that vanished too fast. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. Scarlett looked at her sideways, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Every day." And I have no idea," Scarlett admitted, setting her cup down. "But for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid of it." Jenna turned to her fully now, brushing a strand of wind-blown hair from Scarlett's face. "You don't have to know all the answers, you just have to stay." Scarlett leaned in, resting her forehead against Jenna's. "I didn't just stay," she whispered. "I chose this, I choose you." The words didn't need ceremony. They didn't need music or applause. They were enough. They were everything. Jenna closed her eyes, soaking in the warmth that had nothing to do with sunlight. This wasn't the ending she expected. It wasn't even the life she thought she could have. But it was hers. It was real. Later that week, Scarlett surprised her with a wrapped folder on the kitchen table, plain, unassuming, but tied with a red ribbon that hinted at sentiment. Jenna opened it carefully, only to find pages of research, grant proposals, and handwritten notes. At the top of the first page, in Scarlett's neat, angular handwriting, was a title: Water Watch, Community Project Proposal. "What is this?" Jenna asked, thumbing through the carefully compiled documents. "It's us," Scarlett said, sipping her tea. "It's the thing we were supposed to do before all the rest happened, before the con, the trial, the chaos. We said we'd fix the system that let him exist. This is our start." Jenna stared at her, moved beyond words. "You're serious?" Scarlett nodded, "More than I've ever been." And so they started. One meeting, one neighborhood, one school visit, one city official who gave them a maybe instead of a no. They became a team, not of revenge, but of reform. Together, they built something Deacon could never destroy, because it wasn't built on illusion. It was built on pain that turned into purpose, on betrayal that birthed action, on love that refused to be defined by the wounds of the past. On the one-year anniversary of the trial, they held their first community rally. It wasn't large, no news vans, no viral posts. Just 30 folding chairs in a rec center, a projector borrowed from a local high school, and a room full of people who were tired of being taken advantage of. Jenna stood at the front, heart pounding, voice shaking. But Scarlett sat in the front row, eyes locked on hers, reminding her with every breath that she wasn't alone. When the speech ended and applause, real generous applause, filled the space, Jenna looked down at Scarlett and smiled. She saw it then, not just gratitude, not just admiration, but love, quiet, steady, undeniable love. And just like that, she knew. This wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of everything.